Charlie. It's great to be with you.
Thanks, man. It's great to be here.
Virtually, I guess. But yeah, thanks
Just
for
as we
coming on
can
the
be.
podcast. And I've already had one episode on lucid dreaming with Robert Wagner. And I think for folks who want more of kind of a how-to, that would be a good place for them to go to maybe learn the techniques. But here I was really hoping to dive into some of the more advanced stuff and like what's really possible here, and what does this tool offer. So I thought to start, we could just get into your background and like, how did you discover lucid dreaming and Tibetan dream yoga, and maybe just defining it for those who are unfamiliar with the term.
Sure. So a lucid dream is a dream where you're actively aware of the fact you're dreaming as the dream is happening. So you're sound asleep. You're not in the kind of hypnagogic, half awake, half asleep state. You're not in a state of astral projection or out-of-body experience. You're sound asleep in the REM dreaming sleep state. But while in the REM dreaming sleep state, part of the brain becomes reactivated again, which in turn reactivates self-reflective consciousness. And you're basically in the dream and you go, oh, wow, this is all a dream. So if you ever had a dream where you're in the dream and you're like, oh shit, this is all a dream, that was a lucid dream. But you're asleep. You know, this is a really important thing. If you want to know what it looks like to have a lucid dream, it looks like this. Like you're asleep. You're not in some kind of like strange, psychedelic state. You're asleep. But in your mind, you're very much awake.
Yeah, and how did you first discover this as a phenomenon for yourself, and then, ultimately make it kind of like your living and your main focus?
Yeah, so for my 12th birthday, I asked for this thing called a Nova Dreamer, which is like, there's lots of them now on like Kickstarter or versions of these devices. It's like this sleep mask, electronic sleep mask that recognizes rapid eye movement and then flashes red lights through your eyelids, which is supposed to be like bright enough to make it into your dream, but not so bright to wake you up. And like a few weeks before my 12th birthday, it was like a Sunday afternoon, and I'm flicking through this gadget, like a kind of a gadget guide that came with the Sunday papers in the UK. And I see this thing, and I remember reading about it, saying it can give you lucid dreams, being like, oh shit, I've had those before. And then go, oh dad, like I know what I want for my birthday. It was like $300 or something. So I didn't get it for my birthday, but that's the first, and confirmed by my dad, actually, who's very, quite a cynical chap, confirmed as the first kind of time I mentioned lucid dreaming and knew that it was something that I did. But it was like, I was about 15, 16 when I kind of taught myself to do it. Often at that age for young men and young women too, I'm sure you start to question things, you start to feel there's something bigger going on. So I started smoking a lot of weed, I started doing some psychedelics, and I got really into lucid dreaming because lucid dreaming seemed like this ultimate psychedelic experience where you could gain access to like a virtual reality simulation within your own mind, where the rules of society didn't apply. So you could do whatever you liked. So from like 16 to 18, all I did in my lucid dreams was sex and skateboarding. And I got pretty good at skateboarding, which now when you look at all the neurological studies into how training in lucid dream affects waking state performance, oh, maybe it worked. I only wish it had worked with the sex thing. That didn't work at all. But yeah, lots of sex and lots of skateboarding. So, just messing about with it. But it was a pretty good incentive to do it because it was really fun. And at 16, you're so kind of sex obsessed. At least it gave me an incentive to do it. But of course, there are much better reasons to get into lucid dreaming. Then when I'm 18, like 16 to 18, I had also been into Buddhism. The same time I was into psychedelics, same time I was into lucid dreaming. Buddhism had been on the fringes as something I knew sounded really cool. But when I read all this stuff like no intoxication, the stuff on sexual misconduct, the stuff which I confused, the stuff on, the kind of ethics, how you had to live your life, I thought, I'm a teenager. I want to be wild for a little bit. So I kept it on the back burner, but I gave myself this really weird ultimatum, which I stuck to. I said, until the end of college, which in the UK is 16 to 18, I can do what I like, and I'll just party and do loads of drugs and go nuts. The day I leave college, I will shave my head. I had a long ponytail at the time. I would shave my head, I'd become a vegetarian, and I'd start going to a Buddhist center. Kind of ridiculous, but I did it. Actually, I did it. I shaved my head and I gave my ponytail to this like organization called Locks of Love, which makes these wigs for kids with leukemia. Then they send you a little photo of the kid with your wig. It's kind of sweet. And it's ridiculous. You don't have to shave your head to be a Buddhist. You don't even need to be a vegetarian to be a Buddhist. It can help, but you don't have to. But I did that. And then I started going to Buddhist centers. And the same kind of, I guess there's a part of my personality that's luckily obsessive, not addictive, but it's close, but it's obsessive. So the same kind of obsession I'd put towards, psychedelics and lucid dreaming and stuff like that, I then just flipped into Buddhism. I got really into Buddhism really quick. So much so that by the time I was 19, I'd taken refuge, which is like where you formally become a Buddhist. They give you a new name, they take some of your hair and all this kind of stuff. And then once I really got into Buddhism, I started hearing people mention this term dream yoga, which I'd read about in some of the early lucid dreaming books, but didn't really know exactly what it was. So then I started following teachers who were teaching it, and got some practices. And the practices themselves actually were reasonably similar to the Western practices, or the Western practices kind of taken them from dream yoga. But the end goal was completely different. It was stuff like doing your meditation practice in the lucid dream, going into the lucid dream and transforming your body into the body of a deity or a Buddha as a way to kind of free up the ego fixation we have around our gross corporeal form, really deep stuff. And I kind of had this moment of, oh shit, okay, this is something I've been messing around with for the last 2-3 years, but this is what it's for. This is a powerful spiritual practice. So then I got really into lucid dreaming, ended up living in a Buddhist center for 7 years, almost 8 years. Started working kind of one-on-one with a dream yoga master called Lama Yeshe Rinpoche, who specialized in death and dream practices. And then eventually he asked me to give a talk about it. And I did, and then I did another talk, and then the rest is history would be the Hollywood version. But yeah, a lot of other stuff happened, but that's enough for now, I guess.
So cool. Yeah. And I love that progression from, just kind of playing around with it. And I think that's where probably most people are at with, if they've discovered lucid dreaming, you got to get the 2 F's out of the way, flying and having sex.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's been a lot of my practice up until discovering that this is also a way to train the mind in some really profound ways. And the Tibetans really are the masters at this. And, it sounds like you've studied under some of the greatest living dream yoga masters. I wonder if, before we get into like what's really possible with this practice, we could just address the science, because I know there might be folks listening who are like, well, I'm not a Buddhist. Like I don't, I don't consider myself necessarily, a Buddhist or even maybe spiritual, but what are they talking about here? Is there any real validity to it? So could you explain some of the cool science behind lucid dreaming?
Sure. So the first thing to know is that lucid dreaming is scientifically validated fact. It's been scientifically validated since like the mid 70s. It was actually in the UK that they first proved it. But then a few years later, you got peer-reviewed research over at Stanford University in the US in the early 80s. And then around 2010, you get this big upsurge in interest in lucid dreaming, partly because the Inception movie came out, but partly also because they got someone to have a lucid dream in a brain scanner for the first time. So not just EEG, but fMRI, which is like a live image of the brain. Now, I've been in one of those scanners for this meditation thing where they want to see whether you've changed your brain in meditation. And it turns out I haven't changed my brain at all. But anyway, I went into this study and they put me in one of these machines. And I remember feeling so fucking claustrophobic in here. And it's so loud because this magnet spins around you and it goes, duk, 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 duk. Sounds like a techno rave. And when I was in there, I remember I did think to myself, like, how could anyone fall asleep in here? But some dude in Germany at Heidelberg University did manage to fall asleep in one. And he was a proficient lucid dreamer and he had a lucid dream and they saw exactly what happens to the brain when you become lucid. And once we had that, it was like the vote set in, this is real. And it's so cool. And it's just what they expected would happen. When you are in a state of non-lucid dreaming, so your everyday, dreams where you don't know you're dreaming, the back part of the brain's highly activated. So the visual cortex, the occipital lobe, the brain stem, they're like going off like fireworks. Like, in fact, your brain's more active when you dream than it is right now when we're just chilling. So dreaming is not a restful sleep state. It's a lot of stuff's going on. In fact, it's so non-restful when you dream, you burn calories. So anyone looking to go on a diet or something, dream more. So back part of the brain is highly active when you dream. Front part of the brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, very, very little activity. Now, the scientists would explain this, obviously in a different way to the way the Buddhists would, but the scientists would explain it saying that this is because prefrontal cortex activation is synonymous with activation of the sense of self. So your kind of me, my, I program, that the program of Charlie seems to be located or at least activated with prefrontal cortex activity. Because the prefrontal cortex has such little activity in normal dreaming, this is why you can dream you're people other than yourself. This is how you can dream you're a child if you're an adult, a woman if you're a man, an animal if you're a human. Because that prefrontal cortex has such low activity, your sense of self can be very flexible. However, once you become lucid, and they saw this in the brain scanner, suddenly the prefrontal cortex, boom, lights up at the same time as the back part of the brain is still highly active. So it creates this hybrid state of both dreaming and self-reflective awareness. And that's how they kind of first proved beyond doubt that lucid dreaming was a real phenomenon. But here's the money shot. Here's the cool bit. They found that once the prefrontal cortex lights up, the brain doesn't think that you're dreaming about doing something in a lucid dream. The brain thinks you're awake. You know, we, in a very reductionist model, assume that wakefulness is based on having your eyes open. Sorry, consciousness is based on having your eyes open. It's not. Consciousness is based, well, in this reductionist model, on this activation of certain brain regions. So from the brain's point of view, when you're in a lucid dream, you're not dreaming, you're awake. So because of that, the brain lays down neural pathways and engages the phenomenon of neuroplasticity in exactly the same way as if you were awake. What does this mean? It means there's a potential to learn and actually rewire your brain while you sleep. Now, that sounds like a hyperbolic statement. You know, it sounds crazy. It's not. That's absolutely factual. And we've had studies on this. Again, at Heidelberg, the Germans have done a lot of research on lucid dreaming with athletes. They found if athletes practice their athletic discipline in the lucid dream, so they're totally asleep, right? But they're like, oh shit, I'm dreaming. What was I supposed to do? Oh, I'm part of this study. I was supposed to do squats or to do press ups or whatever it is they told them to do. Or in one case, to flick a, I don't actually know that study, but they had to flick something. They had to do a repeated task, you know, kind of like a shooting a basket or something, flicking something into someone. They repeated this task, the squats or the press ups. And then the next day, they like test them and they see, compared to the control group who were doing visualized training, imagine doing squats or press ups, whatever, the guys in the lucid dream were like remarkably better. It was as if they had actually been doing press ups. Some of them, their personal best increased, even though they were totally asleep, right? I mean, this is nuts. In some cases, it even led to increased muscle mass. Now, of course, the muscle mass was not being gained in the lucid dream. You're asleep. But the neural pathways, which were towards like, I like doing squats, or I find squats easy to do in the zero gravity of the lucid dream, was somehow kind of transferring across into the waking state. And one of the last study, this was a 2019 study I was part of, which had martial artists. So I'm really into martial arts and obviously really into lucid dreaming. So this study comes up and I was like, yes, I'm totally up for this. We had to go into the lucid dream state and practice a certain kick sequence. Like a kickboxing kick sequence, and then see if you got better in the waking state. 80.1% of the participants got better at martial arts by training in the lucid dream. I, embarrassingly, was one of the 19% who did not get better. I did not have any increase in performance. So maybe I just did it wrong, or I had performance anxiety, but I didn't actually get better. But, you know, 80.1% did. This is freaking crazy. This is the kind of stuff that I want people to be Googling. I want your bullshit sense to be going off, and this is bullshit. Google it. It is all there. This stuff is for real. So why don't people know about it? I don't know. My mission is to try and let people know about this.
Yeah.
So the brain, you know, again, it comes down to this. In a lucid dream, the brain doesn't think you're dreaming about it. The brain thinks you're doing it. But imagine what other stuff we could do. Imagine if we could practice being kinder in our lucid dream. Imagine if we could practice kindness. Imagine if we could practice tolerance and love. You know, there's a guy I work with who had, actually, what is it? Is it ADHD? Where he was kind of scared of germs and stuff like that. Didn't like touching things.
Hypochondria maybe, or OCD?
OCD, sorry, that's it. Excuse my ignorance. And he wanted to go into the lucid dream and call out, you know, get rid of my OCD, get rid of my OCD. He said, oh, well, it's kind of like a state of hypnosis. Maybe it can kind of reprogram my brain. And I was like, no, man, do the opposite. Go into the lucid dream and do what you're scared of doing, shaking people's hands, touching things, knowing that there's no germs in there. There's no people you're really touching. It's all a virtual reality simulation, but the brain doesn't know that. The brain thinks, oh, wait, are we cool with touching people now? Are we cool with shaking hands? I think we are. So it starts rewiring itself in favor of that. So yeah, the brain changes in lucid dream. It really is that real. So then when we come down to flying, this is the cool thing. What the frick is happening in your brain when you fly in a lucid dream? Because the brain doesn't think you're imagining it. I like to imagine, this is complete conjecture. I like to imagine that when you walk through a wall in a lucid dream, or when you fly through the sky in a lucid dream, or when you embrace a monster in a lucid dream, knowing that it's just a traumatized aspect of your own psyche, that in some way the brain is reprogramming itself to make it more possible to like fly beyond your limitations in the waking state, walk through the brick wall of your own ignorance in the waking state, embrace the demons of your own prejudice in the waking state. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's so cool. I mean, and like you said, the scientific community didn't really take this seriously, even after it was proven initially, and then Stephen LaBerge kind of popularized it, the Stanford neuroscientist. And then there's more and more research around it, and it really does poke a hole in, or it has profound implications for the mind and for our waking state, and to what extent our waking reality is just a projection in our own minds. Now, obviously, there are limitations to the waking state. There's physics that like hold up most of the time, at least on a not when you get down to the really micro level, but most of the time in the macro world. And like you said, there's also just there's all this potential for kind of reprogramming our default perceptions and beliefs in the waking state. In addition to all these kind of more practical uses like training, there's so much money being poured into like virtual reality games and goggles, and this is a skill that anyone can learn. So I think you're right. Like, I don't know why more people aren't trying to learn this and aware of it. But yeah, let's talk about some of that stuff you started to talk about, like shattering limiting beliefs by walking through walls and stuff, because this has become really interesting to me. Like, I became lucid a couple weeks ago, and I tried to fly, and initially I couldn't fly, and it just seemed impossible. And then eventually, after several tries, I was like, wait a second. And because I've been taking your course, and I was like,
Oh, cool.
I should just call out, I should just tell myself in the dream, like, this is a dream, I can do what I want. And
Yes.
I made that resolution. I think I said that out loud, and then all of a sudden I could fly. So it was like, but it was like this really liberating experience of, I had this limiting belief that I couldn't do what I wanted to, and it was all in my mind. And obviously that doesn't mean I can do stuff like that in the waking state, but it means that there's other limiting beliefs, like you said, that might have disappeared. So yeah, what are some applications of that? What are some other examples of similar ways of kind of like, reprogramming our baseline perceptions using lucid dreaming?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, man. That's absolutely a brilliant example, that once you remind yourself that in the lucid dream state, nothing is more easy or difficult than anything else other than that which our limitations, our waking state limitations say it is, you really start to open up to something quite profound. It's like when you try and walk through a wall in a lucid dream and it seems solid, it's not the wall that's solid. It's your sense of self that's solid. That's what's bouncing back from the wall. So if you can remind yourself, just as you did when you tried to fly, that, I'm in a dream, the sense of self is flexible. In fact, everything is me, not just this me, that the kind of avatar in the dream, that starts to break apart. And you suddenly realize, oh, I can now do impossible things. And actually, if you look at, you know what, there's a way we can explore both. We can explore the traditional Tibetan dream yoga stuff at the same time as looking at the psychological and even scientific benefits of this. In Tibetan dream yoga, there's lots of different schools, but in one of the most, the early school introduced by Padmasambhava into Tibet, there are these 4 stages of dream yoga. The first stage is recognition. That's basically learn how to lucid dream. That's the recognition stage. So, and I've spoken to my teacher about this, and he said, oh, Western techniques, Tibetan techniques, whatever helps people get lucid. He said, they're all the same anyway. So don't feel you need to learn these like esoteric Tibetan techniques. Most of the Western ones are based upon them anyway. They're just kind of pared down versions. So number one, learn how to lucid dream. Number two, so the first thing, this kind of second stage of dream yoga, the first thing you're told to do when you get lucid is to transform fear. So do scary stuff in the lucid dream. And the original texts say things like jump from a high place, knowing that you cannot die. Walk into fire, knowing that you cannot be burnt. Jump in a river, knowing the river cannot harm you. Call forth a tiger into the dream. And then you have options. You can transform the tiger into a deity. You can befriend the tiger. You can ride the tiger like a friendly horse. And it's like the first thing they tell you to do is work with fear. Now, if we look at stuff like Jungian shadow integration, as well as just our own subjective experience of how limiting fear is, it makes complete sense that the first thing we should start to work with in the lucid dream is fear, partly because fear is made of energy. If you think about the things that scare you, it's not subtle. It's like, boom, it's big things, right? Fear, shame, these are big, big energies. And also because fear creates such a powerful block in our psychophysical system, our psychophysical growth. Like how much of our experience of the waking world is limited by fear. What will people think of me? I'm scared to do that. You know, I'm scared to make that jump. I'm scared to make that decision. I'm scared to be myself. And I think we can update what the Tibetans are saying that, you know, back in medieval Tibet, like what were they scared of? Cliffs, because Tibet's really high. Fire, because it's a universal fear. Water. A lot of Tibetans, I mean, the refugee community is different now, but 50 years ago, very few Tibetans swam. So a fear of water. And then tigers, because there were snow leopards and stuff in Tibet, right? But we can update this. You know, what is your tiger? When you get lucid, what is your fear you can bring into the dream and transform? What is your high place? What is your river, which you're scared to enter? If we can do that, this is not only a powerful way to integrate trauma and phobias, but also a powerful way to regenerate ourselves because we get the energy back that we lose in fear. And there've been studies on this. You know, I work with a fear of arachnophobia in a lucid dream. In fact, a few lucid dreams. It took about 3 or 4 lucid dreams. But remember, if you go into a lucid dream and then you fearlessly interact with a spider, like you pick it up in your hand, you let it crawl up your arm, it's going to feel so real. For those people who haven't had a lucid dream, your lucid dreams feel as real as this. Pinch yourself to see if you're dreaming? Nah. If you pinch yourself in a lucid dream, you will feel pain. That's insane. You know there's no arm being pinched and no fingers doing the pinching, but the mind will create the illusion of pain. So if you fearlessly interact with a spider in a lucid dream, the brain doesn't think you're dreaming about it. The brain thinks you're actually holding a spider fearlessly. So again, it starts reprogramming itself. It starts deconditioning that phobia from us. So this can be a really powerful way to get our energy back, to reclaim the energy that we lose in fear. And the same can happen with trauma. And that's why lucid dreaming is said to be such a powerful intervention for people with heavy trauma and PTSD. So much so that a couple of years ago, well, less than a couple of years ago, I did a talk at the Ministry of Defense, which is kind of like the Pentagon of the UK. You know, it's our main like defense network. 12 years ago when I started this, the thought of me going to the Ministry of Defense to give a talk about lucid dreaming would literally be laughable. But there's so much science now showing that lucid dreaming is one of the most powerful interventions for the integration of traumatic nightmares, especially those caused by PTS and PTSD, that they're now, you know, they're doing a PowerPoint in front of all these generals and veterans community leaders showing how this can help. So again, you have this Tibetan idea of going in and working with fear and trauma. And now you have this science backing it up, saying, yeah, it's a really powerful thing to do. So I think we can do both here. I am eventually getting to your question about the flying thing here. So we have recognition, then we have transformation, then you have multiplication. Now, multiplication, it's a weird translation from the original Tibetan. The multiplication stage basically means do impossible things. Fly through the sky, walk through walls, transform your body into that of another gender, transform your body into that of an animal, disappear your body completely and just be oneness with the dream. Hold things in your hand, like you could make a pineapple appear in your hand in a lucid dream, and then make, through the power of your intent, like 100 pineapples appear, and then boom, back to one. It says make small things big, big things small, do impossible things. Now that's the stage that said, now that you've worked with your trauma and your fear, and you kind of cleared the decks, as it were, you've gained back that energy. You now have the energy to start disidentifying the confines of the sense of self by doing impossible things. So just like we said, walking through walls, flying through the sky. So that's actually, a direct thing we're instructed to do. And things like changing your gender in a lucid dream, and a brilliant thing to do. And in fact, with the rise of trans awareness and trans activism, it's worth saying there's a guy called Maxwell Hunter who's got a brilliant YouTube channel called Ra Ra Rabbit, R-A-R-A Rabbit. And he used lucid dreaming before he transitioned from female assigned at birth to a man like he is now. He used the lucid dream to kind of practice. So he'd become lucid in the body he had identified with since birth, or physically identified with. But in the lucid dream, he would transform his body into that of a man. And he noticed that when he transformed his body into that of a man, this like low-level anxiety just dropped. And suddenly he was like, oh, whoa, this is how I feel. I feel like me. This is me. So in the same way as we could use virtual reality to do this, to present people with other options, the lucid dream state allows you to do it. But the big advantage over virtual reality has it is you're inside your brain. You're actually kind of implanting that. You're literally incepting an idea, just like the movie. There's some truth to that. And Maxwell is now fully transitioned. And of course, he had a lot of therapy and all this kind of stuff. But he puts those early lucid dreams where he was able to practice for the huge life change he made, down to helping him integrate that.
It's fascinating. Yeah, you were talking about facing your fears. About a month ago, I had this large decaying hamburger with a mouth chasing me, and I turned around.
Have you recently gone vegan or something?
No, that's yeah. See, it was a hamburger-like thing. It wasn't even really recognizable as a hamburger. It was just shaped like that, and so I'm not really sure what it represented. Probably some really dark part of my psychology. And I turned around and hugged it, and it disappeared into this little like whimpering kind of pathetic thing. And just like you said in your course, and I woke up feeling really like I'd released some real baggage. And
wow.
Yeah, I mean, so someone might hear that and think, well, you woke up from a nightmare, basically. Of course you felt good, but what is the evidence around like psychological healing? Like you mentioned getting over phobias, but are people able to face like larger problems in a therapeutic sense using lucid?
Yeah, I mean, the evidence there, like their PTSD scores drop. So it's
right.
like this is evidence based. Again, people can kind of Google this. This is like people with well, two ways to evidence it. One is the nightmares stop. So people who are hitting like 4 or 5 nightmares a week, train in lucid dreaming. Now it might take months to train, like 3-4 months of training to get to the point where they can become lucid in one of those nightmares, finally face the fear. And often with the veterans I've been working with, it might be that recurring scene that they're back in Iraq or back in Afghanistan. And if they can just have one lucid dream where they, rather than running or trying to wake themselves up, they stay in it going, I'm not really back in Afghan. I'm dreaming I'm back in Afghan. This is just my mind working through trauma. Just like you said in the dream, I'm dreaming so I can fly, reminding themselves, acknowledging, maybe even kind of stating the truth. Maybe that's what happens it's the first time I thought that. Maybe it's that. But if they can have that realization, I'm not really back in Afghanistan. I'm dreaming I'm back in Afghanistan. This is just a nightmare. That can be enough to like stop PTSD nightmares overnight. Now, again, it might take 3 or 4 months of training to get to that point of stability. But once they are at a stable enough point to become lucid in the nightmare and face it, in many cases, only one lucid nightmare is needed. So the evidence base is the nightmares stop and PTSD scores reduce. Now, the scoring on PTSD, actually, let's not even go there. I don't actually agree with the way they score it. But yes, PTSD scores reduce. So we do have evidence here.
And one of the things that you explain is like you're becoming conscious in your subconscious or even, I guess, unconscious mind. Those terms I'll just use the phrase non-conscious part of your mind. So the potential here is more than what you would be able to activate with like conscious therapy or something. And I think you mentioned in the course that the Tibetans believe that a single moment of meditation in the lucid dreaming state is equivalent to like a 1 week retreat or something.
Mm.
So like, what's the mechanism there? Or yeah, how do we know exactly what's going on in the mind that would make this so um, so powerful? I mean, like, why? How is that possible that a single moment of meditation in a dream could have the same effects as a week of a meditation retreat?
Yeah. So that is a direct quote from this Lama, Namkhe Nobu Rinpoche, who until he died a few years ago was like the greatest living dream yoga master. And I always wanted to ask him, dude, what's the maths on that? Like, how many hours a day in that 1 week retreat? Are we including weekends? Blah, 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 blah. Who knows, man? But what he's saying, it's like a really powerful, like one moment of meditation, these dream is worth like loads of meditation the waking state. I think we can say that. The kind of wider Tibetan view on this is that when you're in the lucid dream state, you have 7 times the power of mind, or 7 times the clarity of consciousness. So a kind of 700% increase in your kind of power of mind. Again, we need to break that down. In Tibetan culture, 7 means a lot. It doesn't mean literally 7. So when Tibetans say like 7 times, it means like fuckloads. Okay. So again, there'd be no way to kind of work out, oh, what's my level of conscious? Is it times by 7? We can drop that. What I'd say is just try it. I mean, a lot of people, and myself included, absolutely, God, if you meditate inside a lucid dream, it's, okay, I think it's this, and we can bring some science into this. We can bring some science into it. A lucid dream in and of itself is a state of mindfulness meditation. If we define mindfulness as knowing what's happening as it's happening intentionally, and then in brackets, without judgment or preference to the content of the mind, but knowing what's happening as it's happening with intention, a lucid dream is not just analogous to mindfulness meditation. It is by definition a state of mindfulness, because in a lucid dream, you know you're dreaming as you're dreaming, intentionally, with intention, right? So I think because you are in a state of meditation, if you then meditate within that state of meditation, it becomes this kind of like upward spiral of energy. I mean, just try it. I struggle to meditate in lucid dream because as soon as I go into meditation, it feels like my head's in a microwave. It's just too intense. I have to do mantras just to keep myself grounded. Like, it's so intense. So anyone who's experienced it, you wake up and go, oh yeah, I think they were right about that 1 week thing, because that was a really, really strong experience. How can we quantify it? I don't know. I mean, there have been studies where the scientists have been amazed that when people become lucid, and not let alone meditating in the lucid dream, but just become lucid, the brain goes into gamma. And gamma used to be a brainwave associated with those like monks who've done 10,000 hours meditation. So you do actually get a neurological response. And the scientists are like, oh, I wonder why the brain goes into gamma when someone gets lucid. And the Buddhists are like, because the brain's going to 700% more capacity, blah, 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 blah. So maybe there's a link there, because you shouldn't really be getting those levels of gamma in sleep. No way. I mean, you don't even get them in the waking state unless you're in some deep state of meditation. So the fact that the brain starts firing off into gamma when you get lucid, you know, maybe that's some way of backing it up. I mean, what I would say in support of the Tibetan Buddhist view is that Vajrayana Buddhism, which was the form of Buddhism that flourished mainly in the Himalayas and is sometimes used interchangeably with the term Tibetan Buddhism, although Tibetan Buddhism actually includes all the schools. It's a dynamic tradition. There are certain practices which aren't practiced now, which were practiced 100 years ago. There are certain practices which aren't done now, which were done 1,000 years ago. There are certain practices which have only started to be done 50 years ago. Like, it's a dynamic, evolving tradition. So because of that, I would argue that dream yoga has been a central part of what's called the swift path to enlightenment. It said there are 2 swift paths to enlightenment. They both happen in bed. And I'm only qualified to talk about one of them. The other one you can imagine, right? For lucid dreaming still to be a core part of the swift path to enlightenment for the last 1,000 years or more of Tibetan Buddhism, there's something to it. You know, these guys haven't kind of edged it off. And the fact that it's now being taught openly. You know, when I first started teaching, like lucid dream yoga was not taught openly. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. I think Lama Yeshe probably and the other teachers felt that something was emerging and that now is the time to start offering the teachings more widely. But it's quite rare. 20 years ago, you wouldn't have people doing dream yoga workshops, or if you did, it'd be very rare. Nowadays, you get a lot of lucid dreaming, and you get some dream yoga workshops too, not only reserved for Buddhists and not only reserved for retreats. So things are changing. I think they're kind of opening it up a bit more.
I have a more technical kind of nerdy question that might not apply to some folks might not really understand this, but so I had Dan Brown on the podcast, and
oh wow,
he mentioned at one point that the difference between dream yoga and lucid dreaming was that in Tibetan dream yoga, you're bringing the natural state, you're bringing like Rigpa into the dream state, as opposed to your normal waking kind of mini me sense of self. Is there a distinction? Do your teachers make a distinction, or do you make a distinction between dream yoga and lucid dreaming in that sense?
Okay, so whatever Dan Brown says, he wins. Like, so if I contradict him in any way, just go back to what Dan Brown said. Dan Brown is a very, very rare human being who is both a fully established, accredited, and well-respected actually, I don't know what his qualification is, but psychiatrist or psychotherapist, in the kind of mainstream Western psychological world, who is also not only a Tibetan practitioner, but a lineage holder who has had serious levels of awakening. I know of no other human alive who has those two qualities other than Dan Brown. So I literally shouldn't even answer this question, but I'll throw something of a possibility because it links back to what we were saying earlier. We talked about the 3 stages of dream yoga. There's then the 4th stage, the final stage. Not the final stage, the 4th stage. The 4th stage of dream yoga is called unification. So we've got recognition, transformation, multiplication, and unification. Unification with what? With your Buddha nature, with Rigpa, with exactly what Dan Brown describing there. And in that stage, often reached through a meditation practice within the lucid dream, or a deity self-manifestation, so transforming yourself into literally the form of the deity, which then kind of unlocks the archetypal power of the deity while also dissolving your limited sense of self, but can sometimes just happen spontaneously, but rare. You would enter into this clear light experience in the lucid dream. That's dream yoga. And that's what Dan Brown's talking about. And it's almost like the rest is just a warm-up to get to that stage. Now, for someone like me, it's so rare that I'm ever able to enter into that state, although I may have a few times, that, yeah, you're right. The vast majority of what I'm doing, could it really be classed as dream yoga when I'm in this limited state of mind? On those rare occasions where we enter that kind of unified state of Rigpa, then like that's the dream yoga. Maybe it's a bit like the same in meditation, where like we can sit for 10 hours.
Right.
And maybe in that 10 hours, we have 1 second where it's boom. Oh, I just meditated. And then we realized we had 9 hours and 59 minutes of really just sitting there, kind of thinking or trying not to think. But in that boom, one moment, it's like, oh, that's it. So maybe we could say the same with lucid dreaming and dream yoga.
Okay. Yeah, that analogy makes
but whatever
a lot of
Dan
sense.
says, just go with him.
Right. Yeah, no. And I guess that gets into some more technical stuff. I don't want to go further down the rabbit hole, but that's fascinating. And you mentioned your own practice. I'm just curious, what can you share about like what you're currently working on or areas you'd like to further explore?
I love that. And nobody ever asks that. And it's an exciting question. To share the last lucid dream I had, which was about a week ago. And this was not a dream planned lucid dream. So I didn't have a plan of what to do, but I had run this lucid dream drop-in, which is like a Zoom thing I do that for free, like once a month, where people can come in and chat lucid dreaming. And this lady had asked a question where she wanted to still have an intention in the lucid dream, but also to open up to allow the dream to offer her what it wanted. She felt it was becoming too controlling, her lucid dreaming. So I said, well, a good dream plan in that case is to become lucid and then to call out in the lucid dream, show me something important or show me what I need to see. Now, that's a technique that I learned from Robert Wagner years ago. It's such a good thing to call out in the lucid dream. So last week I became lucid spontaneously and I thought, oh, I can't, like, what's my dream plan? Then I thought, oh, I'll just do that one I recommended the lady. It's a good one to do. You can do it every night of the week if you want, because you'll always get a different thing. You're basically asking the wisdom of the unconscious mind, What's important for me to see right now? Where's my blind spot? What do you want to show me? So I call it out. And then I call it out to the sky, not to a person. If you talk it to a person in lucid dream, you're going to get a personalized response. And who are the people in the lucid dream? Tiny fragments of your own psychology. So you might get a tiny fragmented response. So call it out to the sky. So I call it out to the sky. And then I see these two kids appear, and they're kind of playing with like a train or something, like a little toy, like a car or a train. I can't remember. And they're playing together on the floor on their knees. And then I see that they're disabled. And I go over to them and I'm aware, everything in the dream is me. So I look at these disabled kids, kind of mentally and physically disabled. And I start playing with them, and they had such joy. And in the lucid dream, I thought to myself, like, oh, maybe I'll have a disabled child. And I would love that child in exactly the same way I would love an able-bodied child. And I started thinking like, oh, maybe even it would be a blessing to have a disabled child. I could really help. Later in the waking state, I realized I don't think that was the correct interpretation. What it was my inner child, and it was disabled. And a lot of the work I'm doing at the moment with a psychotherapist is around childhood wounding. And I was like, oh yeah, there's part of my inner child that's like disabled. And I still love it. I still have absolute love for it, and it's still playing in there. It's still quite joyful, but it has been disabled by this wounding that occurred. And then I called it out again. So I'm with these kids, and then I'm still lucid. So I call it again. So I go, show me something important. Show me what I need to see. And this time, this guy appears in a suit, like just looks like kind of everyman in my psyche anyway, kind of mid-30s, white dude in a suit, and he's just standing there. And I say, who are you? And he says, I'm time. And I went, what? And he went, I'm time. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, you're the personification of time? And he said, yeah. And I was like, oh shit. Okay, how do you work? And he goes, let me show you. Jump on. And I'm like, what? And he goes, jump on. And then I jump on his back like a piggyback, like a kid would do on their father, like my hands are over his shoulder like that. And then he starts walking. And as he walks, these images appear. And the images explain to me while he's walking through that time. Oh, no, he says, I move you forward to create the illusion of you. I move you forward to create the illusion of you. And I realize like we're piggybacking on time, and that time is like, it's required for us to sustain the illusion, the illusory sense of self. I still haven't really fully processed this. Maybe someone watching can have a better interpretation. And I was like, oh shit. And then he shows like how everyone is just piggybacking on time. And this is like the concept of time moving forward. And then when I'm on his back like that, I whisper into his ear, and I think, I don't know why. Well, I know why I said this, because I'm hurting from it. My mum's got Alzheimer's, like pretty advanced stages now. So I'm scared by that, and it hurts me. And I whisper in the ear of time, how can I cope with my mum's death? How can I cope with my mum's illness? And then he looks up again and goes, and he points, and again, these images appear, and it's me piggybacking on time through a maze. And we're piggybacking towards one thing, and then there's like a dead end at the maze. And he just turns around and goes to another. Then a door opens, and we go through the door, and we go down here, and then another dead end. Then we turn around, we go down another, and a door opens. And he looks back and he says, there'll be many dead ends, but a new door will always open. You will always move forward. And I was like, oh my God, it was just too much. And I start crying in the dream. And then if you cry in a lucid dream, you cry in real life, because again, the brain doesn't think you're dreaming. So then the tears woke me up on my pillow. And I mean, there's loads more to unpack in that dream, but 20 years of practice this year, actually, because I'm 37, 20 years of practice. And I'm still amazed at the power of this stuff. I'm still amazed at the ability for the mind to create those teachings, such wisdom. And I know it was just me. It was my idea of how time works. It's probably completely inconsequential and bullshit, but it was my idea of how time worked. It was my idea of my inner child. It was my idea of working through my mum's illness, but it had a deeply healing and profound effect on me that was nothing but beneficial. And I think, what a cool resource. What a cool resource there is. And I want to help as many people contact that resource as they can, because why are we here, right? Other than to try and help.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you could like teach yourself something, and it's like you might have known that deep down somewhere, but it wasn't conscious of it. And even, I mean, yeah, we I guess we can't know for certain what's going on there, but it's just wild to me. And you read about people who've come up with new inventions and
Yeah, so
such from
even
lucid
if you're
dreams.
really skeptical, we now know beyond doubt the unconscious mind is like a huge hard drive of experience. We know this on the fMRI studies on hypnosis, which are freaking interesting, by the way. Putting people into fMRI scans and then putting them in hypnosis and basically seeing, is it for real? And yes, it's for real. Like when people like stopped, weren't getting a pain response when they put stuff in their arm, and they could see, the brain is literally not lighting up. They aren't faking it. They're not pretending to be hypnotized. They're not feeling pain. So we know from those studies, the one I was referencing was actually a memory study where they found people could tell the color of their wallpaper on their bedroom wall when they're pre-verbal, thus confirming the theory that the unconscious mind is a hard drive that contains all our memories. Think about every book you've ever read, every podcast you've ever done, every good piece of advice you've ever received, every film you've ever watched, every TED talk you've ever watched. All of that is stored in this library of wisdom in the unconscious mind, or library of wisdom. I not even say that, library of information in the unconscious mind. We don't have much access to that library. In a lucid dream, you get the keys to the library, and there's some intelligence within the dreamer that can pick out or maybe create algorithms of possibility based on those huge amounts of data and information that can basically give us pretty good advice. I think that's what's working. At a spiritual level, yeah, maybe there's other stuff going on, but at a really basic level, at least that is what's happening.
So the last thing I wanted to touch on was just this idea that this practice really does impact your waking life beyond working through these psychological blocks that can obviously have a profound effect on your waking life. But you have this concept of lucid living, and even just the idea that doing reality checks throughout the day can make you realize when you're on autopilot and help get you off of autopilot and become more aware of your surroundings. But then just broader implications like this idea that everything in the waking state is also happening in your mind. And just curious if you could talk a little bit more about this idea of lucid living and how lucid dreaming practice can bleed over into areas of your daily life.
Yeah. So from a Buddhist point of view, like the main point of having lucid dreams is because every time you have a lucid dream, you're said to get like a tiny, tiny taste of awakening. Because in the lucid dream, the moment you become lucid, a revolution happens in the mind. You see what I thought to be existent is in fact non-existent. What I thought to be outside of me is in fact an internal projection of my mind. And all the people who I thought were separate from me are in fact non-separate aspects of my own psyche. It's said that if you have enough of those experiences in a lucid dream, eventually like kind of drops filling a bucket, it might flow into the waking state. And if you look at the descriptions of people who are fully awakened, it's very similar to like how we might feel in a lucid dream. And even if you want to get really far out, even the same capacities we have in a lucid dream. If you look at the kind of tales or myths, if you want to see them as that, of these great yogis from all the different traditions, not just Buddhism, who have the ability to fly. Listen, it's Jesus, for example, right? Jesus could walk on water. Sounds a bit like multiplication stage, right? Doing impossible things. Jesus could take one loaf of bread and turn it into 1,000 loaves of bread. Remember what I said about the pineapple? That's literally exactly what you train for in the lucid dream. The other great yogis of the past who said to be able to walk through walls, appear in two places at once, that's not like random miraculous stuff. That is specifically the kind of miracles that you are trained to rehearse in a lucid dream. So perhaps there's some truth to that if you have enough of the experience, eventually it bleeds over into the waking state. And that would be full lucid living. If we were fully lucidly alive, that would be like Buddhahood, right? So obviously incredibly, incredibly rare, but maybe we can get little flashes of it if we have enough lucid dreams. I'm still waiting for mine, but pray that it comes. So there's that potential. That's the kind of concept of lucid living. I think from a psychological point of view and from a scientific point of view, again, let's always ground this stuff in science. They've found that lucid dreamers, when you look at their brains, they have, psychologically, lucid dreamers are better at thinking outside the box. So people who have regular lucid dreams think more creatively. And they believe the reason for this is because they're spending a lot of time in a space where the rules of reality don't apply. So their mind can think up different options. It's not so limited. They also found, and this is the coolest science on lucid dreaming, again, Google it, lucid dreamers have bigger brains. Because the part of the brain that lights up when you're lucid is so rarely lit up in sleep, the increased blood flow to it in your dreams makes it grow and become denser. So there's actually a part of the brain, not your whole brain, but there's one part of the brain that is bigger in lucid dreamers and not in non-lucid dreamers. And what is that part of the brain responsible for? Waking state insight. So levels of clarity, levels of almost lucidity. So it seems like from a neurological point of view, we can actually track this, that people who have lots of lucid dreams seem to have more lucidity, more clarity, more insight in the waking state than non-lucid dreamers. And again, just to bring everything back to the real basics, it's a subjective experience.
Right.
Learn to lucid dream. And often after you've had a few lucid dreams, maybe like 10, 20, 30, you start, well, this is like what people have said, they start to kind of feel more awake. The opposite to what people think will happen. Oh, if you have loads of lucid dreams, are you going to lose contact with reality? Literally the opposite happens. Lucid dreaming is an anti-psychotic. If we look at, William Dement, who was one of the guys who kind of pioneered research into REM dreaming sleep, a term we use all the time. He describes REM as psychosis, a form of psychosis, because if we describe an element of psychosis as believing internally generated hallucinations to be real, then every time we have a non-lucid dream, we are in psychosis. We are believing internally generated hallucinations to be real, because you think your dreams are real until the alarm goes off and you're like, oh shit, that was a dream, right?
Right.
So in the same manner, lucid dreaming can be seen as an anti-psychotic. Every time you have a lucid dream, you are training the neural pathway of the brain, or you're training the insight part of the brain to say, oh, I can see through projection. I am more aware of internal hallucination. I know not even more aware. I know the difference between internally generated hallucinations and reality. This is why lucid dreaming is such a good prep for anyone who's going to do like ayahuasca or like some heavy psychedelic trips, because lucid dreaming trains you to tell the difference between what are basically psychotically generated hallucinations and, conscious reality. So I think that too, trains us to be kind of more awake, more aware. And you see this in lucid dreamers. People are often expecting lucid dreamers to be really like, whoa, hippy dippy, man. Wow, I'm having a lucid dream. They're not, man. Most people with a stable lucid dream practice, like, boom, this is it. I'm awake. I know when I'm asleep. I know when I'm awake. No bullshit. We're not losing contact with reality. If anything, we're training our minds to know reality. So I think that's an element of lucid living too.
Right. And that just made me think of the parallel too between, there was a Harvard study that showed we spend 47% of the day mind wandering. And it's probably more than that. Anyway, the way
they did that study before Instagram, man. That study's like over 10 years old now, so now I reckon it's way higher.
It was before Instagram, and it was conducted by notifying people on their phone to ask them if they knew what they were paying attention to. So not a great way to tell. But the point is, we spend so much of our day lost in thought, and each of those mind-wandering moments is a neurosis where you're completely convinced that what's happening in your mind is where you are. So in the moment that, in the 10 seconds where you think you've lost your keys and you're imagining being late to work and then losing your job, you've actually lived out that nightmare for 10 seconds. And so in the same sense, when you become more conscious, start to become more conscious in your dreams, you might notice quicker that these simulations our mind play out are just entirely in the mind and cause most of our mental suffering. So
very good point. I agree totally. Never thought of it like that, but I agree totally.
So I wanted to dish out a couple of rapid fire questions here at the end for you. Are you ready for the rapid fire?
Yes,
section?
I'm ready. I hope they're not too difficult.
What is the coolest thing you've done in a dream or favorite dream activity you'd like to share?
I'll go for coolest thing I've ever done was remove gravity from the lucid dream. It took literally 8 lucid dreams to get it, but when I eventually did it, just how you would imagine everything went boom, and I was like, oh fuck, that's so cool.
That's sweet.
It was really difficult to do because, of course, I've only ever known a world with gravity. So like the mind just couldn't comprehend a world without it, but eventually it could. Yeah.
Unreal. I'll have to try that. It'll probably take me years,
Super
but
cool.
if you could have dinner with anyone, past or present, who would it be?
Padmasambhava, the second Buddha of Tibet.
That's so funny. Last night I was asking myself that question. That's the answer I came up with. Do you want to
Really?
explain
Same one.
Yep. Do you want to
Oh, dude. Well, look, we can double date it. You know, he's a busy man, so we'll do it together.
Yeah, I've just heard, you probably know more about him than I do, but I've heard from Alan Wallace, this guy brought Buddhism to Tibet and he could do some really cool things with his mind.
Yeah.
It's tough to kind of parse out fact from myth, but I'm sure that he was very advanced in his mind training
Exactly.
expeditions.
And he was a historical figure. You know, it
Right.
seems like he existed. Where how much of the life story do we see as parable or take as fact? Who knows? But he was a historical figure who was clearly a badass meditator, who introduced the Bardo teachings, which is the death and the dream stuff, the two things that I'm most interested in Tibetan Buddhism. And he was a revolutionary, just like Buddha.
Right. We need a modern day Padmasambhava, I think, to be flying around New York.
Totally. We need to become him.
Right. So the last question I ask this to everyone is that you get a 15-second commercial and it goes out to the whole world. What would you say in that 15 seconds?
Be kind to each other. Yeah, be kind. That's
Nice.
what I would say. And to yourself.
Nice. Right. Yourself includes
Absolutely.
part of that, everyone. Wonderful. Well, Charlie, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I guess finally, just kind of personal plug zone. Where can people find out more about your work? Where should they go to connect with you, or what resources do you have?
Yeah, sure. So my website, charliemorley.com, will have everything. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. I think also if you just Google Charlie Lucid, then all my stuff comes up apparently. Someone tried that recently and said it works. So yeah, you'll find there's online courses, there's books, there's live Zoom events. There'll be live real life things when the zombie apocalypse finishes. Yeah, you'll find me.
Great. And I highly recommend to listeners to check out your course if you're maybe not as into reading. Like it's a video course that explains pretty much everything you would want to know to get your practice started and even get really advanced in your practice. So I highly recommend that. But Charlie, it's been an awesome conversation. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have a brilliant rest of your day.